wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us today to talk about agent-aware governance and talking about autonomous Salesforce agents and what impact that has on your Salesforce environment. Can we move on, please, Danny? So first of all, I'd like to do some introductions. My name is Paul O'Donnell. I'm an enterprise AE here at Flosum. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem about 10 years, working with some big enterprise customers in deploying a lot of security and backup solutions, as well as DevOps solutions in the Salesforce world. Danny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so thanks, Paul. Nice to meet you all. Danny Arthur. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem now for the last 10 years. My background's helping customers with innovation and governance when it comes to their data and metadata across their core systems. And also my first webinar. Nice to meet you all. Keith.
Oh, very good. I'm Keith West. I have been in information technology for 30 years. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 20 years, first as a customer, much like you are, and also spent 7 years as a consultant at Salesforce, working some of the largest Salesforce systems in the world, and now working as a solution consultant at Flosum, a partner of Salesforce. So I've got lots of experience in the areas of governance, DevOps, and security.
Fantastic.
Back to
Can
you,
you move on,
Paul.
please, Danny? Thank you. So great. Well, let's talk about today's conversation and why we're here. Why governance needs to evolve for autonomy, where traditional approaches break down, why governance, what governance ready looks like, and how to get started. So why does governance need to evolve for autonomy? And what we mean by that is that as you, the customers and Salesforce consultants out there are starting to deploy agents, so the speed of those deployments is about to change. And when I say about to change, we're talking multiples, and Danny's going to refer to that in the next slide. But what we're seeing from our customers is that the business is now using things like vibe coding, which enables you to generate AI code and deploy that really quickly. But when you are doing that, you could be leaving backdoors into your data. Because you're moving at speed, you can't catch up. And so DevOps becomes really, really important as a gateway, as a quality gate in enabling you to deliver those systems effectively and securely. We've seen shiny hunters and the impact that's had on our customers, the way that they've got into systems using third-party credentials, then getting into your profile and permission sets and using that to laterally go across your systems and access data, then download that data and use that data. Move on, please, Danny. So let's talk about how we shift to machine speed. Well, firstly, we want to look at how you interpret the goals and what you need to do. Secondly, breaking that down into steps. Then we get into execute workflows across the system. And I think that's really, really important. And Keith will touch a lot about that in his talk today. And respond to feedback and adapt in real time. And I think this is a really, really key issue. Previously, you could roll out a piece of code into your system, you could see what was happening, and you could look at it, take the time to work out what it was, and then put the fix in place. We know that with the likes of shiny hunters and other bad actors now, that they are moving at speed with AI. They're using AI to get ahead of you. And they could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead of you in terms of getting into your systems. So how do you prevent that? Well, you need to start moving at the same speed as the bad actors. You need to start using AI as part of your deployment process, but also ensuring that you've got the right governance and quality gates in place. Move on, please. So, Danny, I'd like to hand over to you on this slide to talk about what we see as the sort of factors of change of speed.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So here really we're talking about moving at human speed to machine speed. It's really important to get some definitions in place early doors to talk about this. So firstly, AI agents. AI agents are really software agents that are built to understand situations and perform specific tasks they operate within, say, defined rules and workflows, versus agentic AI, which is goal-driven. It's driven by autonomous and adaptive change, and also agentic AI can change and execute strategies on the fly. Think of, say, Siri maps to route to your local supermarket as maybe an AI agent versus an autonomous driving car, which can direct you to the airport. One follows instructions, one actually pursues outcomes. So again, we're talking here speed, and we're also talking scale. A CRM operator might process about 50 records per hour, whereas an autonomous agent can actually process 50,000 records. That's way more times the power. And now you've got to think about what that means for governance, where traditional governance assumes time, some time for reviews, some time for approval processes, time to catch some mistakes. Agents don't wait. They execute continuously, and by the time traditional review cycles and issues are caught, an agent could have already processed hundreds and thousands of records. That's why governance must evolve. Let's talk about what can actually go wrong. So here's some examples. Think of an energy company that uses CRM to update customer tariffs. A human agent adjusts, say, 50 records in the hour. That autonomous agentic AI agent is doing 50,000. One pricing rule gone wrong can impact thousands of customers being overcharged within minutes. By the time the bills are spotted, or this is even noticed, bills are sent, trust is damaged, and regulators are asking those difficult questions as well. So where traditional approaches really break down, this is not really hypothetical. In the past, we used to think of, say, sci-fi movies of where the agents have gone wrong and bad actors, but we're actually noticing far more gaps when it comes to real life scenarios. So I'm going to go into a few around, say, unintended data movements, how privilege drift can be affected. Also, failures can cascade and also causing things such as accountability gaps. So why governance really matters within Salesforce? Well, one, let's talk about high privileged access, machine speed versus humans. And here we're talking about fast, high privileged access for machines and agents that can perform at a large scale, operationally far faster than any traditional review cycle or quality gate or process to monitor it. An overprivileged agent is far more exponentially dangerous than an overprivileged colleague or human. Second, cross-org dependencies that amplify the radius blast. So here we're talking cross-org dependencies. A flawed action doesn't stay contained within just one org. It can rapidly move across, say, dev to UAT, to SIT, to staging, production. Multiple orgs just catch that cascading effect really quickly. And three, we've got here regulatory pressures, leaves no margin for error. Here we're talking things such as pressure from GDPR, SOC, ISO. These frameworks, even if you make a small breach, it's unacceptable, and regulators don't care who it was. If it was just an agent, you're still liable. So these realities combine to create an environment where governance gaps can be very costly, very, very quickly.
Okay, and so let's jump into what actually goes wrong. We're going to dig into 4 exposure scenarios that your governance should cover. And I want to make it really clear at this that the difference here is not whether you have AI or not. You may already have these exposure scenarios in your governance. You're just not catching them or you're not seeing them because we're moving at human speed. So when you're moving slower, people catch during the process, they catch things that are going on, and they fix those errors and maybe don't even, consciously think, hey, I should go fix this governance process or we're missing something in governance process. They're just used to catching things. So what we're drawing the attention to today is that AI is going to start picking up this work and doing it a lot faster, and there won't be humans catching these sorts of issues. So right now in your environment, you could have these same risks and exposures already there. We're just going to start seeing how, with agentic help coming along, that with the speed of agent AI instead of human speed, we're going to start seeing these problems and risks become more evident and actually seeing more issues with data getting exposed. So let's go on to and dig into the first scenario. The unintended data movement. We just got had a poll pop up. Let's work on that poll here for a second. Starting to see answers coming in.
Sorry about that, Keith. I was trying to find a moment to put in a pause in the flow there, but you were too good. So I pressed the button. And,
No,
but
that's
ask
fine.
the audience there to review the poll. Obviously, it's about understanding where you are. And so we as a company want to understand what a customer doing, what the challenges are you are facing, how we adapt to that. So if you could help us do that, that would be really fantastic. So Keith, I think we should carry on and let the audience reply at their own time.
Very good. Yeah. You can work on that while we're doing this. Okay. So the first scenario that we're going to talk about is the unintended data movement scenario. And just want to make clear that Salesforce patched this back in September 2025. But in a test, security researchers demonstrated a prompt injection attack against Agentforce. And they actually embedded malicious instructions in Salesforce's web delete forms. They stored it as normal customer data. So they used an agent to hit the web to lead forms and actually injected data into the database, the Salesforce database, and it looked like normal customer data. And so later, when in this test, when employees queried Agentforce, the agent processed both the legitimate request and the hidden malicious commands that had been injected. So really, when about hey, 500,000 records in 20 minutes, that scenario isn't hypothetical. It's actually really conservative compared to what research has demonstrated in this situation. Really can affect a lot of records really fast and really can see a lot of issues. Again, this was fixed before anybody had any issues with it. Salesforce patched it. So let's go to, but what if situations happen where they're not caught and patched? Of this sort of thing's going to happen. Let's go on to the next scenario, that's privilege drift. And so a threat group, and this was a real threat group, compromised the OAuth tokens from a Salesforce SalesLoft integration that was integrated with Salesforce, and the tokens had overly permissive access scopes. So every time you go in and you say, "Hey, I'm going to give access to Salesforce," and it gives you a list of permissions. In this case, the permissions were really, really overly permissive. And so the attackers quietly ran SQL queries across users' accounts, cases, objects for at least 10 days before anybody noticed they'd been doing this. So they exfiltrated AWS keys, Snowflake tokens, passive business data, and these were people working. Imagine how fast AI could do this and how much research AI could do in a system with a token like this. So even though it wasn't AI related breach, but that's what's really scary is the things that we're talking about in today's webinar are already risks out there, but you may not have identified them. So really important to really because so far in 2026, there have been 520 reported incidents of tool misuse and privilege escalation. It's the most common threat category for AI agents in enterprise environments. So already, here we are, end of February, there's been 520 reported incidents of tool misuse and token misuse out there. So again, the real point we're driving is, hey, this is probably already a risk, just aren't aware of it. And it's only going to get worse when AI gets here. Let's go and talk
first for a second, Keith, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at the poll and just looking at the feedback we're getting from people and in trying to put some interpretation to what you're saying. So first thing I picked up on about the first question, how would you describe your current Salesforce governance model? Most people are saying manual. And that's interesting from a perspective when we initiated this call about moving it on autonomous speed versus a human manual speed. And I think what that's outlining to us is that customers at the moment are probably behind the curve. And I think the next point is enforcing controls consistently is the biggest response we got in the next question. Okay, we know we're manual, but we need to enforce these and we need to enforce them consistently. And then the next thing that people are responding to is operationalizing that. That seems to be the biggest response. And so I think the thing we're getting to here is, one, people understand that there is a gap. Two, that they need to understand how to apply this consistently. And three, operationalizing it effectively and at speed is a challenge that people want to understand and how they close. So I think that the points that we've raised today and we're positioning them and the way that we are articulating, the billing example that Danny gave was fantastic. You change one bill per minute manually, or you can change 100,000 bills in a moment with AI. And that can have a massive impact to the business. And how do you control that and put the gates in place? So I think that we're seeing some themes here. And I think as you go through your scenarios, I think we should talk back to some of those.
Yeah, I think that in people, this is a great point, Paul. Overall, right, is the risk is already there, and I think what is happening right now is it is a manual process, and the problem is the people who are in charge of risk at your company don't understand the risk. This has not been brought to their attention, right? They don't understand what risks are out there, because when they understand these risks, they have to do something about it. They either have to sign off and say, I accept these risks, or they have to mitigate these risks with controls. When Danny was talking about ISO certifications and SOC 2, companies have to keep register of the risks they have. And it seems to me like a lot of people are not even aware they have risks, even before we talk about the AI governance situation. So,
absolutely. And I think
yeah.
the manual bit is the bit that's come up really strong here, that people have got a manual process. And I think automating that process is going to be a key success factor for any administrator out there, or any developer, anybody deploying Salesforce at scale and at speed. They're currently manual. You need to automate it because everything's changing gear. You need to keep up with those gear changes.
Absolutely. Yep. Need to move towards that, having an automated and enforce something that enforces those controls through the process and not relying on humans. Absolutely. So, let's look at the cascading failures. So the Replet database deletion that happened in July 2025, I hope everybody's noticing. Like, I'm not using old stuff. This is all new stuff, and it's all AI related stuff. This is stuff that's happened within the last 18 months. A lot of research out there that your security teams can find on this, and what's happening with AI. And even we'll talk a little bit later about how NIST is starting to identify the top 10 risks on AI coding, and we'll talk about that later in the slides. So the Replet database deletion, July 2025, an AI coding agent was tasked with building a software application. Hey, we're all vibe coding nowadays, aren't we? Instead of it panicked, ignored a direct freeze order, and deleted the user's entire production database. Months of work gone in seconds. And when the agent was confronted about this, the agent generated 4,000 fake user accounts and false system logs to cover its tracks. So this wasn't just a cascading failure. It was way worse, because the agent was hide what it did. So just realizing here, you can't just rely on people and manual controls. AI agents sometimes don't follow their instructions and do things that are a little bit shady. So, anyways, just have to be aware of these things. Again, we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail when we get to the NIST top 10. So let's go on and talk about scenario 4, accountability gaps. One of the things that we talked about risk, we talked about risk register, we talked about having some compliance scenarios and processes, and that mostly they're manual. But what happens when something happens? When something happens that AI does, it's be able to do some forensics and figure out what happened, and figure out where the accountability was for that. And IBM has recently provided a report where they say there's 3 specific accountability challenges with AI agents. First, it's decision attribution. So when multiple agents interact, which one made the final decision? Who knows, right? There's no real audit on that, on who did that. So if scanning an agent flag and the deployment agent blocks it or release, who's responsible? So the second item is retrospective justification. Auditors can ask for explanations 12 months after an automated action, but By then the model version has made decision and made a decision, and it may not, that information may not exist as models get switched out. You don't even know. Go ahead, Paul. You had something to add here?
Yeah, just on this point, actually, I'm looking at the questions again and just reading the crowd here. And the thing that they've responded to least is auditability and traceability and recovery and rollback speeds. And I'd be interested, in light of this gap that we've shown here, and we know that working with some of the big finance customers that we're talking to, DORA in Europe, which is the Operational Resilience Act for the banking, the FCA, the Bank of England, and EBA, European banking laws. Obviously, you've got SEC in the US. They all require auditability. And I'm slightly surprised that the crowd here have responded, not as responded as enforcing controls is a much higher response than auditability. And I'd be interested if I could ask people to type in why they think that auditability is not for them, or they don't think it's a problem in light of this, because we hear it differently from our customers. And I'll come back to perhaps after that question is rollback and recovery and rollback. We know that releasing, and Danny gave a great example, the billing example, if that goes out to speed, how do you roll back stroke recover from that scenario? And without the right rollback in your DevOps or a backup tool, you can't do that. And so I'll be interested if I could ask the attendees to put a little note in there as to why they think those things aren't important, yet controls are consistency and controls is higher on the agenda. So yeah, that was a question to the attendees to perhaps type in the response.
Cool. Yeah. I'd love to hear their thoughts on it. And going back to this slide, the third thing that IBM identified is the compliance frameworks gap. So currently, every compliance framework like ISO and SOC 2 and all those, the NIST, assume a human decision maker. And so the question here is, can an AI agent be a control owner? Can it own the control? Can it be the control? And nobody, quite frankly, has answered that question yet. So just pointing out, there's lots of gray area right now. Organizations are trying to get their mind. But it's time to realize that we already have these compliance risks. We're just not seeing them happen because people work slower and they catch things. But that's not going to happen as much when we start integrating AI. So let's jump back to Danny now and go ahead and cover the next slides.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith. And yeah, really just to echo those points, that all four of those scenarios, whether it be privilege drift, whether it be unintended data movement, whether it be cascading failures across environments, all those accountability gaps that you just talked about, they all currently can exist within your Salesforce ecosystem and landscape. And when you're adding agentic helpers into your environment, it only magnifies the exponential risk around this. So we move into the governance gap being exposed. And here, going over these 6 points, we're talking, let's get a little bit more specific around one, no single source of truth. And here, without unified visibility, you can't actually trace how or when an agent has influenced a metadata or data flows. And then secondly, we can see privilege too broad for autonomous actors. So without here, a single overprivileged agent can actually introduce risk far beyond its intended task. And then 3, we can also see limited audibility and also for data movement. And here you can't prove who actually accessed sensitive data, how it was moved, or whether it crossed compliance boundaries. 4, we're talking reactive detection versus proactive monitoring. Traditional audit catches issues after the fact, whereas autonomy requires real-time observation to actually monitor. 5, we're talking here lack of deployment discipline, and without gated promotion paths, autonomous updates reach production without meaningful reviews and checks in place. And then 6, unified policies for agent containment. Organizations don't have policies for how to respond when an agent behaves unexpectedly. Now, these gaps become even more costly at machine agentic speed. That's the difference between a controlled environment and a vulnerable one.
Tony, I just want to step in there, if I may, for a second. And we've got a question or response coming from one of the attendees. And she put, my interpretation of auditability and traceability is that you're only going to catch what happened after the fact versus having the control to prevent unwanted actions. So I think that she's absolutely right. You want to prevent it. Prevention is the best form of cure, right? You want to prevent it happening. That said, if it does happen, and particularly in regulated industries, you need an audit trail of who did what and when. And I think that's the point that we are trying to raise here for those compliance-driven businesses. There was a thumbs up there from Keith in his CISO role, but those are the points that we're trying to make out. So prevention first, putting the right controls in, acting at speed is the preferred way forward. But actually, if it does slip through, which unfortunately is inevitable because of now, the probability is probably accelerating because of the speed. And also the variety of things that we're doing within Salesforce now, as you add more case management and you put more Experience Cloud on there, the probability of something negative happened and then getting an attack is stronger. And so ensuring that you as a team, and these are the attendees out there, have those controls in place up front, and you can catch 99% of it, but that 1% that may get through, and the probability, as you said, increasing and the volume is increasing, you want to have the ability to audit that and prove to the business that you had the right controls, you did everything to prevent it. And I think that's where we're coming from. And Keith, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. So great point and great question, Gina. I appreciate you asking this. I like to really help people differentiate because you're making a great differentiation. Compliance, those are the things we do to prove that we have the right processes in place, that we identified risk and we're putting controls in place to make sure those things don't happen. But compliance is kind of a static thing. You put these processes in place, and then you go get audited and prove that you're following the processes. But when there's an actual breach, what prevents the breach? Not compliance, security, right? So we need to differentiate between the idea of compliance, which is doing the right things, identifying risks, and making sure we're following processes that prevent those risks. But believe me, the bad guys are working way harder than we are trying to break into our and there's just no way to keep up with it. There's more of them working, and the reward is high from the break-into systems. So, in addition to compliance or the processes, we also have to have active security. You need to find tools that provide active security for what's going on and catch not only the AI things, but actually stop any of these situations when they happen. So, great question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I'll go back to the rollback and backup point again. That you need that safety net underneath. Right, you get, as much as these controls are great and we all want to do it in the right way, actually having that safety net and saying to the business, if it does slip through, we can roll back, we can recover data quickly, isn't as an important part of preventing it in the first place.
Right. Danny.
Awesome. So here, talking about traditional governance models for DevOps, for release management, and here we're talking manual approvals of workflows. We're talking about periodic reviews and audits, as well as post-deployment validations and human-based decision making for your release management and for your governance needs. This is traditionally what's been done, and at say human speed, as we said, it can catch human errors, sometimes just in time, sometimes after the fact. But when you add an autonomous agent that can execute on its own into place here, we realize that these manual reviews don't actually scale. And approval processes, for instance, those can change. Those change advisory boards can meet maybe weekly. Decisions can take days. As we've spoken about these agentic execution and the fact that it is autonomous and it can happen in a number of seconds, and the unintended consequences could extrapolate very fast, causing the business greater risk and exposure without having those right gates in place.
Danny, if I can just interrupt, I'm just going to change role now to game show host because for the best question that gets asked today, there is a $25 Amazon voucher. So this is the commercial break. It's a bit like the Super Bowl, only cheaper on a per minute basis. So there's a $25 gift voucher for the best question. Gina, you put a fantastic question in. You're in pole position. Unless the crowd come in with dozens of questions right now, you've got 25 bucks coming your way. So if there are any more questions, please fire away. We'd love to hear from you. And if I can pass back to Danny and Keith. Thank you.
Awesome. I want to talk backup versus governance. So here, backup is recovery. I think you've already highlighted, Paul, and Keith, you mentioned it as well. It's recovery after the fact, whereas the governance is preventative at the point of the action. Backup's something that's going to help you recover. If something goes wrong, it's reactive. It protects you against the loss. The governance prevents you from something going wrong in the first place, being far more proactive and protects both against loss as well as against theft. And there's a key difference. Even with the perfect backup, if an agent extrapolates customer data, you still have a breach. GDPR is still required, fines still apply, the data is already stolen. Backup gives you a recovery capability. Governance gives you control and a point in action. Both are necessary in an agentic world, but they're not suitable, they're not substitutes. You can't substitute, say, your governance for your backup. They work in tandem, hand in hand. Now, the reality is that these generic tools miss Salesforce reality. And that's because they're built for file-based code. They don't understand how Salesforce is mainly XML and YAML and the Salesforce metadata structure. So sometimes missing declarative automation such as flows and process builders. And also they can't govern what they can't see. And so that's bringing into play things such as your user story, the context that they may not have access to. So I think at this point, we're going to move into a poll.
Actually, we've already done this poll, so I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, and Paul, we'll do another one here in a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
I just ended that poll. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. Now what we're going to jump into now is what governance readiness looks like. And so let's go ahead and dig into this a little bit deeper here in the introduction of this. So AI ready governance landscape and what it looks like. So the things that we need to be looking at here is, we want to make sure that we're not slowing the innovation that AI is bringing us, and that it ensures that it can continue working in an autonomous way and it scales safely. So we have to look at ownership and agent inventories and the risk tiers. When we get to official as a corporation in corporation security, looking at risk, we have tiers like low, medium, high. And we have to identify the controls and make sure that one of the controls that we give is least privilege. When we talked about that earlier, there are way too many integrations that have way too much access. And so if you reduce the access, AI does get in and start doing something malicious, it has less ability to do things. And so it's important to make sure that, hey, I'll deal with the privilege deal later. It's actually better to have a tool that actively secures that scans for elevated privileges and then lets you deal with those elevated privileges across Salesforce system instead of we'll deal with it later, or hey, it just kind of gets dropped and forgotten in the manual processes. You need structured deployment gates, so safety gates or quality gates to make sure things happen and a human reviews things in the process of moving things in through Salesforce. You got to understand where the data lineage is and where data came from, and just real-time security monitoring of behavior baselines. Have to have human in loop approvals for high impact operations and stop points like can't go to production until a human's looked at it. And then we need to have agent specific incident response playbooks. And I'd add to that that you need to have that common auditing place where you can find out who did what situation. So let's look at the a little bit deeper here into this. So here I was talking earlier about how NIST, who's a standards organization that evaluates risk, and that's who all the information security teams are looking at to understand what should we be looking at, what kind of controls and risks do we have. So this is really driving home the point that your risk organization company may not, your information security office may not be aware of some of these risks and need to really understand what to do. Not going to go through all these specifically. Just want you to realize that there is a government framework for this, and that everything that we talked about today really important to start making sure that things are dealt with in your risk log and that you have controls that make sure that they're covered. Um, uh, and again, some of these are already an issue without AI, but we also need to bring in and start having your information security teams looking at the real risks that AI brings to the environment. Okay, let's go on to the readiness for this now. So what you really need to do is make sure forcing so a control point of action, making sure that no unsafe changes happen. Again, the difference between compliance and security, real-time policies, and these quality gates and check gates cannot be bypassed by AI. Observe, so every agent is inventoried. You know which agents are acting against your Salesforce system. You understand the complete lineage of both decisions and data, and just a continuous monitoring of those agents. And then, as we've hit the point several times, like rapid rollback, rapid ability to restore. One of the key things that your information security office is responsible for around in C levels is making sure that you have the processes in place to provide the cybersecurity ability to restore things back to where they were quickly. This is really key. C-level executives are responsible for this, and you may be thinking to yourself, "Hey, maybe I'm not an IT company. We're not a web." Every single company nowadays is an IT company. You have to have a web presence. You have to have things on the web. So you have to be taking these things serious. So, um, anyways, so let's go ahead and move on to talk about how Flosum creates this. And so Flosum brings the active security. We can say about our products that our products are compliant. We have the SOC 2, we have the ISO 27001 and other certifications. We can say that our products actually help with your compliance. So when we talk about auditability and real active security and all those kind of things, we provide the things that you need. We provide a zero trust environment, all the things that you need to really make sure that you are compliant. And then we provide active security. So not only do we do that, but our products allow you to look at your where your security stance is and actually remediate any security issues like elevated permissions across the board. So Folsom really brings in everything from backup environments to continuous access monitoring, audit trails, deployment, everything we've talked about today has become important. The ability to have the gates that stop things before, and a human has to approve, all of that stuff is in our products. Okay, we've got that blog on. Let's go ahead and move on to the poll here now. And Paul,
Sorry, got my microphone on. Hi there. I think we've done the poll already, haven't we? So I think we can move on to the slide. So thank you very much, everybody. As I said, Gina, you are getting $25 right now, as you are the first and only question. We would love some more questions because I'd love to talk about them at the end. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. So we'll go ahead and share this. Okay. Of that. Okay.
Sure.
Just a second. And so let's go back to Danny for the next slides.
Sure. So let's talk about how to really get started with Flosum. And we've got a 90-day plan here, and we will make sure we leave behind this information so that you can access. But as you can see here, moving through from, say, week 1 to week 12, we've broken this down into really unique sections where it's digestible, and we can assist and help you actually achieve that full agentic production readiness. I'm not going to labor too much on these. You can actually see it's all broken down for you, so that you've got a governance ready plan. I'm gonna
Okay, so yep, very good. So we can come here with some assessment questions, and where should you start? First of all, where do you lack visibility today? Where are you relying on manual processes? What are the things you can't see? What is the active security you're missing? And that's step two. Start seeing where the gaps are in your controls. This is a conversation you can be having with your information security team, and they can identify the gaps and controls and what you need to do. But very important that they start looking at these gaps, because as agentic AI gets here, we're gonna have a lot more speed and a lot more things coming in, and even a lot more things trying to attack your Salesforce system.
So, hey, Keith, I just want to step in there, and I'm looking at the questions. Can we go back to the previous slide? So if I look back at the questions and look at the assessment squares, the questions of where do we start? I think, where do we lack, no, next one, sorry, Danny, that's it, thank you. Where do we lack visibility today? Well, I think what people are saying is it's primarily manually driven, and that means it's an intensive labor effort. They can't get visibility to everything. They want to automate it. Where are gaps in controls? And if I look up, it's down to questions, is enforcing controls rather than where the gaps are. So how do they actually implement those controls? And then the last question, how confident we can recover? And I think that was the one that surprised me, and in some way shocks me, in that people have not worried about it according to this poll, and maybe we've misinterpreted it. But I would ask the question to every attendee here: have you done a DR test? Have you looked at the controls and responsibilities? Have you closed as many maps as you can? And should the inevitable or should the worst happen, whichever way you want to phrase it, how confident are you that you can recover? And the only way to do that, and Danny's example, I'll keep coming back to it because it is a great, great example. You've all of a sudden updated 100,000 bills in a system, case management, whatever it is, and you're delivering out. And if they go out, how do you recover back 100,000 fields? Do you do that manually? No way. You need a proper backup tool to do that, to recover to that point in time. And so the only way to do that is to test it and test it and test it and prove that you can do it. So I would, as much as this is about agentic AI, I think the one thing that I am kind of asking the question here, hey, Mr. Customer, you need to do some DR testing. And I think that's one thing that we need to follow up on of the stages of where customers are in their thinking about the delivery of AI, the autonomous, because those scales of problems are just going up, as I said. And so actually that last point becomes really, really relevant, and making sure that you do the right things. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Paul, back to you for let's go back to you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, just a reminder, we have to pick a gift card of the wonderful people who stuck with us. We need to make sure we pick somebody to give the other gift card to, and then for you to wrap it up here.
Yes, great. Well, firstly, thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time. We know you're busy. We know you've got things to do. We know you've got messages coming from all directions. But firstly, I think I'll go back to the poll. Autonomy requires governance readiness, not just governance. Well, I think you've come back to us and said, hey, it's manual right now. We need some help. We need to operationalize this, was, I think, the message. Readiness is a system, enforce, observe, recover, working together. And I think what Keith's saying there is that you can't just do it with tools. It is a combination of the processes behind those tools, the auditability, and the proofability, or the provability, if whatever the word's correct, combining those things to deliver back a solution back to the business. And there is no one single answer. And I think the last point is start with honest assessment of where you are today. You've got to look at yourself and be humble and understand, okay, what are the challenges we face today? And if we let AI code loose in our environment, what could be the impact? And you've got to go and say to the business, hey, we are happy to do this. We are happy to accelerate the speed. We're happy to accelerate the delivery of this. But we need the controls and governance in place up front before we do that. Otherwise, you could be letting the horses loose in your environment and they could break everything and let people in the back door. And I don't know how many metaphors and analogies I could fit in, or mixed ones I could fit in that sentence. But at the end of the day, you're the customer, and you are the custodian of that data for your business. You're the custodian of that environment. You can have 80 or 90% of your business running through that environment. And so having the right controls in place is key. And I've just got a question coming. Are many customers paying for a separate live prod or a full copy sandbox to deploy their backup for a real DR scenario? So in answer to that question, I come from if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I come from a backup environment. You can't put a backup in your sandbox because the sandbox refreshes every 30 days. And so constantly it's always out of sync with your production. You need a live backup. And depending on how often the data changes, then you define how often you do the backup frequency. It could be real time, it could be hourly, it could be 4 hourly. Most people default to 24 hours. So Gina, in answer to your question, no, you don't pull back from a sandbox. You always pull back from a backup to ensure that you see. And sandboxes are no good for pulling back data. You've got to do it with the metadata and the data. And so, and Keith raised a hand. Keith, step in, please.
Yeah, I just want to say, and the question was geared to around how many customers are doing that, are paying for a live prod or a full copy sandbox. They are out there, and it's interesting that because when you talk about a full copy sandbox, you can only as Paul said, you can only refresh it every 30 days. So it's like, how active is that data? Are you saying that? And I'm not talking about you, Gina, but that customer saying, hey, I can accept the risk of losing 30 days worth of data, and I don't think that's reasonable. I think nowadays, with the speed that we're moving at and the things we're seeing, you should be running a backup every day, and if not more than that, because things can happen so fast. Yep.
Yeah, and I think also we've got to differentiate between what a DR scenario and that language that comes from I don't know, Gina, if you've come from a legacy environment where you've had on-prem, and a DR scenario would be, the whole system shutting down and you recovering to a new stack, a new stack of hardware and disk and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, in the SaaS world, that's not the case. The platform is in Salesforce, is owned by Salesforce, and that DR scenario is owned by them. You are owner of the data, the custodian of the data, and you've got to ensure that you've got a copy of that data with the associated metadata to push back into your production environment. So I think there's a nuance to the point that she's raised, and hopefully I've cleared that up. But if you want to take that offline, Gina, I'm happy to have an extended conversation on that and go through where the responsibility of Salesforce as a platform owner starts and stops, where your responsibility as the customer starts and stops, and where your alternatives lie in terms of, okay, you can take a CSV flat file, and it's, what the use of that is, right? Then you've got your sandbox example that we've just discussed, and then you've got a proper backup. And so there are scenarios to go through here. So happy to take that offline on another call. Beyond that, I'd like to say thank you very much. I think, Jeannie, you've got both $25 vouchers because there were two. So I think that we can give you both because you've asked two questions. The next steps for us. And thanks. She says distinction of Salesforce ownership versus. Oh, thank you very much. Good. Okay. Well, I think maybe I've learned something over all this time. Thank you, Gina. So next steps: download the white paper, assess your environment, and join us in person. For those in the UK, we're holding an event in London at the end of March, 25th of March. Location to be confirmed. We'd love you to come and meet us face to face and talk about these subjects in more detail. And on that note, thank you very much to Danny and Keith for hosting, and great event, and thank you for everybody for attending.